Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about Dune and who are the liberators of Arabia. And let's talk about slash around the movie Dune and Western centric stories of the rest of the world. So I've already made several Dune videos in the past, and you can find some of those uh, with our moderators links and probably in the description. I've made at least two, I think. But since the movie's out, it's everyone seems to be talking about it, so I might as well make another one. The second part of Dune, Dune Part Two, which deals with, as far as I understand, the first book of Dune. I know there's many Dune books, 6 Frank Herbert books, plus others. Yeah. Try to be nice at least for the first half an hour. Dune, is one of the most celebrated science fiction book series of all time. That's as far as I know, that's true. It's one of the best selling science fiction books, certainly in North America. And it's very popular. As I said, Dune. I remember, it's one of the best-selling science fiction, or it's frequently described as the best-selling science fiction novel in history. It won the inaugural Nebula Award for Best Novel, the Hugo Award, in 1966, and was later adapted to film in 1984. There's been several, obviously, film adaptations, a 2000 TV miniseries, and obviously we have the 2021 and now 2024 two-part film series. Just starring obviously Timothy Chalamet and directed by Denis Villeneuve. I like Blade Runner 2049. Obviously, I'm a science fiction writer myself, so I like Dave Bautista both in Blade Runner 2049 as Sapper Morton, the very sympathetic replicant android, and then of course he is I think he's one of the nemesis in Dune. The Dune, also directed by Denis Villeneuve's two-part film series, and I'll try to say the positive things first. So I gotta watch it just because, I like Arrival is another Denis Villeneuve sci-fi film starring Amy Adams. That one is actually really good. There's been at least two really good Denis sci-fi movies. So and Dune. If you don't know most people I think know what it is. I probably don't have to recount the plot. There's a lot. You can go back and look it up on Wikipedia. Let's talk around it first. So it was a big best-selling novel. Came out in the mid 20th century. 65. It's actually interesting. It was published by Automotive Manuals publisher. After 20 mainstream publishers rejected this story, Dune is the world's best-selling science fiction novel of all time. I don't know the actual stats. Let me see how many copies of Dune. 20 million copies. So that must be translated to dozens of languages. So I mean, as far as like novels go, like sci-fi novels, like Dune is definitely like very popular. I wonder how many Star Wars novels have been sold. Well, I mean, just to put it in perspective, 75 million copies of Star Wars books. Now maybe that's more than one book, but I mean, like that's a lot of books too. um, and but 20 million. I mean, at least for like just like um, Dune was like obviously first a book, and it was for a long time just a book, right? I think the first films, um, the first film wasn't made for like a long time after the initial release of the novel. So it was literary first for a while. Whereas Star Wars obviously started out, Star Wars, A New Hope in the late '70s, right? And then from there, came obviously Empire Strikes Back, and then there were novelizations like afterwards. But Star Wars, as far as I mean, unless I'm incorrect, Star Wars was first a film, right? And so so Dune is, and also Dune came earlier, '65, right? Like when did Star Wars? Um, it was '77, right? So it was a good 12 years, over a decade later, and obviously the setting, science fictional setting of a desert planet, um, in a multi-planetary civilizational galaxy wide stage. So Dune and Star Wars have a lot of similarities. Very large, very sharp tooth, subterranean, subterranean, semi-deified or literally deified alien species are featured. Right, the Great Sarlacc, and in Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, and of course, Shai Hulud, or the Great Worm, um, of Dune, of Arrakis. Uh, I'm starting off. I got so many things to say. I'm gonna be as nice as possible for the first little bit, so I can get this video possibly somewhere in the algorithm. Got to be more diplomatic. But yeah, no. So Dune, it features giant worms. There are the Freemen of Arrakis, right? Played, I think the leader is played by Benicio del Toro. No, I'm just kidding. It's played by who's the leader played by? I can't remember his name off the top of my head. It escapes me. Zensuni wanderers who are considered the planet Arrakis their home. Um, Zendaya is obviously one of them. Water is very scarce in their region. Um, they all have blue eyes because Frank Herbert, like dropping mushrooms, psilocybin, and the blue elements of the mushrooms inspired him to turn everyone's eyes blue. Um, uh, okay. Anyway, so yeah, so you have the Freemen of Arrakis. Um, it I can't talk. I've got to slow down before I start saying the wrong things too early in the video. Um, I'm just grabbing some screenshots to get like an idea of like what it is. Obviously inspired by various West Asian people's dress, clothing, their language. The new Dune film has apparently the language director has erased a lot of the origins, the original Dune's language, which drew more from actual Arabic, Middle Eastern cultures, and like obviously Arrakis, very very thinly veiled reference to Iraq, or literally it's just Iraq in a lot of ways. And West Asian country, and the new Dune 2 apparently has kind of obscured all of that, and it's this kind of it grabs random like Chinese sounding words, and it just has some kind of completely more. There's nothing that's really completely made up when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy, but it's the Arabic origins of a lot of Dune, especially when it comes to the language, as far as I know, in Dune 2, or sorry, in the modern films, are kind of scrubbed and then replaced with a more like generic uh, Central and then even East Asian language. It's all made up, and so I'm not sure exactly what the point of that was. But anyways, and what's up, Grant? So anyways, so but I think like the basic premises of Dune. Um, I guess I can't really beat around this bush any longer. I gotta kind of just get straight to everything. Liberators of Arabia. So I mean, obviously the big question is, if the main characters, and this is the thing, like there's been a lot of discourse around this, obviously, and there's a lot of Dune fans. Like it is one of the best-selling books of all time, best-selling science fiction books of all time. I mean, obviously I write science fiction for a living. I mean, a lot of that is in games, so I make video games, but the writing of the games is like central to the, like Neofeud is a science fictional game, and the story is like very, very important. It's more important than like, I'm not an action movie. I'm not gonna make anything on the scale of Call of Duty or Dune or Star Wars. I don't have that much money, production teams, and massive Hollywood backing, right? So the story is very important. So like, and like I have written sci-fi for a long time. Sci-fi, speculative fiction, cyberpunk. I tend towards cyberpunk, but cyberpunk is a sub-genre really of sci-fi and kind of speculative fiction more generally. And so like I think that like the story, the people who like this story have a lot of how should we say this? Well, like let's say the book came out in the mid 20th century in the United States, right? Frank Herbert is an American, right? Like let's get some background on this guy, right? Frank Herbert was an American. He was born in 1920. Okay, so Frank Herbert was an American who was already 30, 40 years old. He's 30 years old in 1950, right? He was a pre-boomer American. I mean, he was from way back then. He was 40 years old in 1960 when Dune came out. He was 45, and he was a white American man, right? That's who he was. Also, it was interesting that Dune was first published in an automotive publication, not in a science fictional, not in a science fiction formal. Like it wasn't in Omni. It wasn't in like it wasn't like in the front shelves of bookstores in New York as a science fiction novel. It was that I didn't know that. And Frank Herbert was somebody who he did have things he wanted to say. I don't think that that's false. He worked as a newspaper journalist, photographer, book reviewer, ecological consultant, and lecturer. Like he did like go to the Pacific Northwest, right, and try to work in environmental science. He did some kind of work in environmental science, right, exploring the possibility of desertification happening, ecological damage happening and worsening, in particular with like dunes, like literal dunes, because there are desert regions of North America, right? And like studying ways to prevent the west coast of the United States from further being taken over by dunification, by environmental destruction of various types, desertification, loss of ecology and the plant life. And he did like do some research on that, right? And he did go to the Middle East. He went to Middle East / West Asia, and the Dune saga obviously involves some of that, or the Dune saga set in the distant future, taking place over millennia, exposed complex themes such as long-term survival of human species, human evolution, planetary science, ecology, intersection of religion, politics, economics, and power in a future where humanity has long since developed interstellar travel and settled many thousands of worlds. Like I do think that's what he wanted to do. Like I don't disbelieve that Frank Herbert. Um, I don't yeah I don't disbelieve that Frank Herbert believed that he was trying to say things about human evolution, the long term survival of the species, ecology, planetary science, all those other topics. Um, and But we also have to remember like who exactly he was, and the place and the world and the society and this culture in which he was raised, right? Which is to say, he was a white man in mid 20th century, the United States of America, right? And certainly after Dune, he was fairly gainfully employed, and so was his son Brian, right? In the American publication industries. Okay, now you can now. I mean, I will let people. I'm gonna come. I'll come more to that later on. Um, Frank Herbert was yeah. So he was born in Tacoma, Washington. Um, his upbringing was spending a lot of time in the rural Olympic and Kitsap peninsulas. He's fascinated by books. Could read much of the newspaper before age 5, etc. Due to an impoverished home environment, largely due to Great Depression, he left in 1938 to live with an aunt in Oregon. He enrolled in high school, where he graduated next year. And that's not super important, but he was in 1942, after the U.S. entered World War II, he served in the Navy Seabees for 6 months as a photographer. Suffered a head injury, was given a medical discharge. After the war, he attended. So he was a photographer in World War II. After the war, he attended the University of Washington, where he met Beverly and Stewart at a creative writing class. They were only students. So he was, he got into creative writing. He sold 2 pulp adventure stories to magazines, Esquire, and he's sold a story to Modern Romance. They married in Seattle in 1946 and had 2 sons, Brian and Bruce. In 1949, like Brian Herbert is the one who largely carries on the kind of stewards / carries on Frank's legacy, manages Frank's empire, Frank Herbert's empire, we might say. In 1949, Herbert and his wife moved to California to work on the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. They befriended psychologists Ralph and Irene Slattery. Slattery introduced Herbert to the work of several thinkers who influenced their writing, including Freud, Jung, Jaspers, and Heidegger. Also familiarized Herbert with Zen Buddhism. And like I don't have to go through all of his entire life's work. I mean, but it's important. I mean, I'm trying to get a context of who Frank Herbert was, the author of Dune, right? Which informs a lot of like why Dune is the way that it is, right? And the people who read Dune, the audiences who were reading Dune were who, right? Primarily American baby boomers, American and some older generations, but they're American mid 20th century, mostly white people. That's who it was. That's who the audience was, right? And what do we know about that? I mean, I'm just gonna say that. I mean, that is the place and the time. Like indisputably, that's who these people were, and that's who bought the books. And these are who the fans are, especially the original fans that have come up through the ages, who have also dominated the publishing industry of science fiction. Like I was actually at a NASFIC, the North American Science Fiction Convention, and like it's a particular. It's a lot of it is there's obviously a heavy predominance in California where a lot of science fiction movies get made. Which manifests the Star Wars. It manifests the Blade Runners. It manifests the Battlestar Galacticas and the Dunes, right? And so the Hollywood sets that the Star Treks, right, that bring to life these science fictional worlds, all of that, much of that is centered around and happens in California, with particular, and the way that the book publishing industry functions, and the way that the Hollywood, cinematic visualization happens, which, I mean, again, and those are American. So again, these are 20th century, mid 20th century, and late 20th century American empire. They're American empire products. And I mean that in a global Mickey Mouse McDonald's US primacy hegemony, where from Japan to Brazil to Germany, everyone was eating hamburgers, or made to love baseball. Everyone was watching cowboy movies, and people were then watching desert-based science fiction movies too, right? And this was a world, right, largely dominated. Obviously, there was another power in the world that the U.S. did not like that much, right? I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the 20th century? I don't know. A lot of people maybe, but I mean, there was America, and then there was another sphere that the United States was not very happy with, right? And that's the world in which, my point is that, like, that, whether for better or for worse, that's the world that is the place, and that is the world reality, right? And that is the society, the milieu, the zeitgeist in which Frank Herbert existed, and that is the zeitgeist and the milieu in which the audience existed. They were predominantly American science fiction reading, but not all of them. Some of them were just random, just people who read books. Dune became very big, right? So many people saw Star Wars, just as another comparison, right? Star Wars was another product of the American Empire of the mid 20th century, at its height, right? And like, I think that, because I think I'm saying that because I want to talk about eventually what liberates the peoples of Arabia. Now, I know that's not what it's called, but like Lawrence of Arabia, just to bring it into American and Western, cultural products, even outside of science fiction, about the desert regions, about West Asia, about Iraq, right? What Lawrence of Arabia was one of the most, Ridley Scott. I mean, I like Ridley Scott movies, obviously. Blade Runner. I just watched Prometheus the other night. Rewatched one of the sequels to the Aliens franchise. I feel like it got a really bad rap. Not that it was underrated for reasons of when it came out. But anyway, but Lawrence of Arabia is directly referenced in Prometheus as David, the not actually son, the replicant android of the empire having billionaire Peter Whalen of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, right? But David's favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia. He's like watching it on repeat for multiple years, while the rest of the crew is in cryosleep, headed, light years across the Milky Way. And Lawrence of Arabia, but why was Ridley Scott? Why did Ridley Scott put Lawrence of Arabia into that movie? It's because Ridley Scott is who? Ridley Scott is he's British, but he's a Anglo-Saxon from the Anglosphere. Born in the mid and lived through the mid to late 20th century, and that had a massive impact on the United States and the Western culture. I mean, it's really like when you say United States, we're talking about the world culture, because the United States was dominating most of the world for post World War II to the very near present, or I mean, arguably to the present and waning, obviously, but like from the end of World War II, from the 1950s all the way up through like the 2010s, right? This is the period in which, right, is the height of the U.S. planetary primacy, the first world hyperpower empire. Well, whether you think about it or not, it's kind of irrelevant. culturally, resources, control, military domination, political, financial domination, right? So that, I mean, and that has to be taken into account. And Britain was the predecessor, which really Scott is from Britain, right? And so, and Lawrence of Arabia is a movie based on an epic biographical adventure drama based on a life of T.A.E. Lawrence and the Seven Pillars of Wisdom, directed by David Lean. We don't need all of that, but it comes from Columbia Pictures. What is Columbia Pictures? It is American soft power, or it's an American film production company, right? And these are not neutral. I mean, that's another thing, right? So when we ask like who is liberating who, right? And what films, because film, like historical analysts often refer to the British Empire as a print-based empire, right? It was obviously it involved military power, right? It involved the British naval ships, the British Armada, and these fleets sailing across all of the seas, Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, up and down the South China Sea, up the Yangtze, right, into the Yellow River, all across Africa, right, through until they lost it, the Suez Canal, to Egypt. Speaking of Arabia, and speaking of the desert regions, and but the United States was known as the film empire because to maintain the mass control that's necessary to maintain the signal to noise, to maintain the American signal to other cultures, other financial, military, and technological and hard and soft power entities in the world, right? Like the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire, had some writing involved in it, and a lot was financial and military, right? But it was also cultural. All empires require cultural domination across a wide spectrum, financial, religious, right? Linguistic, obviously. This is why language eradication and culture eradication is central to the Roman, British, French, American, Spanish, all the empires. Japan forced the Chinese and the indigenous people on Taiwan to give up their ancestors and adopt new ones. So to maintain the American signal, the Hollywood industry through not just Columbia, all of Hollywood, right? The film, radio, and TV, but films were exported. So why South Americans, right? Peoples in Brazil, Argentina, and Africa looked up to Donald Duck, the American sailor, right? Donald Duck was American hegemony building, right? The Mickey Mouse ears were in Paris and in Japan, right? The people of Tokyo played baseball, right? Hawaiians had to eat, hamburgers and give up a lot of our language, right? Because it was backwards and we had to learn English, right? And this was now, of course, that's sold as, well, we're going to make you more modern, we're going to make you more advanced, this is only going to be good for you. The more American you become, the better you become, right? That was the 20th century. That was the post World War II 20th century. And before that, it was the more British you become, or the more French you become, or the more Spanish you become, depending on who was in your house, right? The better you were. The less you, and by you we mean obviously non-European, non-empire cultures, the less African, the less Asian, the less indigenous, the less Hawaiian, the less Anishinaabe you are, the better. The more American you are, or the more British you are, or the more French you are, the better you become. You become a better person. And in fact, if you insist too intently on remaining who you were, we might have to kill you. Like in the Vietnam War, or like in the war on the Soviet Union, the wars on China. If you try to resist apartheid, you try to resist, right, the forced Americanization, the forced Britishization, the forced Frenchization too intently, and you don't just let it happen, we might have to extinguish you from the earth, right? With chemical warfare, like in the Korean War, also our economic systems, which are better than yours, right? If you don't adhere to American capitalist liberal democracy, we will drop barrels, thousands of tons full of, defoliant Agent Orange. We will drop, cargo crates full of malarial mosquitoes, which the U.S. did, and wipe you out with biological warfare or just bombs, like bomb every school, hospital, village, every rice paddy, every museum, every mosque, every university. We'll bomb everything, and then after the craters cool down to cinder, we'll bomb the craters again. That's what the U.S. did, and the British and French did similar things too, as well, in Korea and Vietnam, all across West Asia, all across Arabia. So my point is, and so obviously, but at the same time, there is like the United States was writing these stories about what could help people, what would liberate the freemen of Arrakis, right? Again, directly, Frank Herbert even personally admitted that this is a direct correlation to Iraqi people, Syrian people, the people of the Middle East, right? And so, I mean, you see, there's a lot of paradoxes here and irony here, right? Which is that, how is, I mean, obviously it's like, well, Frank Herbert didn't fly an American warplane and bomb Iraq himself or blow up Koreans himself. Frank Herbert didn't, go on a naval vessel and fire cannons into other people's, hospitals and preschools, right? Frank Herbert didn't fund and arm far-right extremists and mujahideen through the CIA and through, psychological and counter-revolutionary and color revolutionary operations. He didn't personally do that, right? He didn't create corrupt vassal states based upon crushing any left revolutionary potential in Saudi Arabia and in UAE, and he didn't install the Mujahideen. He didn't install the far right in Afghanistan and put in power corrupt officials in Egypt, right? And install a settler colonial genocidal entity on the Palestinians. Like Frank Herbert didn't personally do all those things. He was just daydreaming. He was just daydreaming in Portland. He was just dropping acid. He was dropping tabs of acid, washing it down with some magic mushrooms, right? Putting ayahuasca in his eyelids, and then just tripping, man. He was just tripping. He was just tripping ball. He was opening up his third eye. He was in California being groovy with the hippies, learning about Buddhism, and then watching some, going to film some, some Lawrence of Arabia, like watching the film sets of Lawrence of Arabia, and then, trying not to look at the military bases that the U.S. and the British were installing all over the place, and already had all over the place. So but you see, there's a lot of paradox. There's a lot of, so obviously, when we ask who are the liberators of Arabia, and then we look to and we point to a white American man from the 1960s, right? There's an inherent paradox in that, right? Where it's you have to, there, the American Western mind has to jump to innocence, right? It has to constantly jump back to, well, I had no idea. It has to jump to ignorance and innocence, while simultaneously claiming to have deep, clairvoyant, one would say Bene Gesserit foresight, right? Because this is a claim that a lot of people will ascribe to Frank Herbert and his Dune series, right? It was prophetic. He knew like so much, and like what would be like Paul Atreides and the Atreides family. Frank Herbert himself could like see the future and was determining for Earth like how we could deal with climate change and how we could deal with these power struggles, and like or like telling us something really important, right? But at the same time, like, you know, coming from the a place that was simultaneously the opposite of liberating, the opposite of helping, right? I mean, obviously, the United States would has and will continue to claim, and Americans that stand for their their Western liberal capitalist democracy, they will say, well, we were and we still are trying to help Palestinians, right? Who are from the desert regions of West Asia. Americans will still we are, I'm just trying my best to help the American military and the American government and the American corporations. We're just trying to help Palestinians. We're just trying to feed them with this. We're trying to feed them with this. Look, we gave 38,000 boxes of food. I mean, never mind that it's pork that had pork fat, which most of the people in Palestine don't eat. And also, one of the food drops actually killed 5 people when they dropped it on their head, and it's not even less than 0.01% of what you actually need, and less than that percentage of what the U.S. has funded and armed the U.S. aircraft carrier to kill them with. But anyways, let's throw that aside and be nice. But I mean, I like the like obviously 2024 is a little bit, but there are still people who are in their cowboy mind. You know what I'm saying? I say cowboy mind. They're in the American television empire, the silver screen empire, right, of the mid 20th century. And these are a lot of people who also are fans of Dune, which again was written in the 1960s by a white American man, for white American men predominantly, but also some women and some non-white people too. And those people, right, have difficulty resolving. They have difficulty reconciling what they're seeing in the Middle East right now, or they're trying not to see it, right? And they're trying with who they think they are as the American liberators of the earth, right? Which includes Iraq and Syria, right? Because if you ask a liberal, they will say, "Well, we were just trying to get rid of Saddam Hussein. We're just trying to get rid of Saddam Hussein. We were trying to save Iraq. We still are trying to save Iraq. You know, like Paul Atreides, we're still trying to save Syria. You know, like Afghanistan, it was Russia basically, was doing a lot of that. I think, like, pretty sure, like, if anything bad's happening in Afghanistan, it's probably because Russia was doing it. If Vladimir Putin, if the authoritarian Putin hadn't, like, I don't know, made terrorism, I feel like if America could, or if these darned desert people, if these darn Taliban, if these darn extremists in Afghanistan could just let America bring, liberal capitalist democracy to Afghanistan, then they would be saved. They would be helped by us, right? And now some people will say, well, but yeah, I mean, Dune, but then later on it gets really bad, and it's anti-messianic stories, and it's like, because humans bad, and all the we needed 26 billion or 14 billion or some number that somebody pulled out of a hat because it's science fiction and shit's made up. At the end of this, I'm gonna go on a mini Silver Spook high frequency jet engine decibel education stint, not a rant, about how Dune plays on, and lots of science fiction authors play on people and their marketing for sci-fi and fantasy plays on people not understanding what actually being a writer is like, which is to live in perpetual abject terror and to suffer heart attacks every time you open your bank account on your phone, right? That's what being a writer, like, is not. Anyway, I'll go on that later. Let me jump back to the present. There's this belief that somebody would know, 20 years down the line what would happen in book 25. This is nonsense, for the most part. And anyway, so but if Americans believe, that we're saving, right, we're liberating, because I mean, Dune, like, again, right, coming back to it, right, Frank Herbert became a best-selling author. This is another thing that people don't realize about writing in general, right, which is that, like, to an extent, yes, authors are saying things that are telling people new things, right? That's part of it. But when people are writing, people are looking, especially when it comes to like fiction and new stuff like that, people are looking to see themselves reflected in the stories they're being told, right? That's and arguably for mainstream audiences, so like really big selling things, right? I'm trying to get the number of books. Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to big mainstream audiences, right, people are looking to see who they are reflected in the story, right? And so because Paul Atreides, right, now again, I'm not going to recount the whole plot, right? But just a little bit, like, let's just do the basic. So, in the book, Paul Atreides, a ruler of the ocean world Caladan, is assigned by the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV to serve as, obviously, Saddam is a name from that region, West Asia, to serve as chief ruler of the planet Arrakis. So Arrakis is a harsh, inhospitable desert planet. It is of enormous importance because it is the only planetary source of melange, or spice, a unique, incredibly valuable substance that extends human youth, vitality, and lifespan. It is also through the consumption of spice that Spacing Guild navigators are able to effect safe interstellar travel. I don't need the whole plot, but basically it's like, Paul shows up. Paul has prophetic dreams. Paul is there to, there's a lot about breeding programs, and you know what? I'm not gonna get in. I mean, it just, I'll save that for the end because I want to keep this ranking in the algorithm. But I mean, stuff. Okay, I'll say it right now. Dune reads like some of the Dune, especially the Dune and the Dune series and the Dune sequels. They're like maybe on par with Hellraiser. There are dog chairs, and there are like, super cats. And I'm like, is this like animal? Is this like Animorphs crossed with like it's like Mad Max? And I mean, I understand it because I mean, I like some schlocky post-nuke dystopia Mad Max ripoff stuff, like Hell Comes to Frogtown. Okay, I will watch the trashiest stuff. But like, I read the Dune's, looking at what's happening in Dune, and I'm like, this is like, I need people to buy my books. And I'm going to write some cat people and dog chairs. And there's going to be lots of weird breeding. And people are going to turn into giant worms. And stuff's, cool stuff's going to happen. And I understand. I know what it's like, Anyways. Okay, I lost all my Dune fans already. Too late. I mean, those do happen, though. These things do happen. There is people turn into giant worms. And there are a constant reiterations of eugenics, breeding programs, and feudalism is inevitable, apparently is a thing as well. Feudalism is inevitable. We need the feudalism. It's gonna happen, has to happen. But anyways, okay, let's get back to the plot of the Dune, the first. So the planet's indigenous freeman people, seeing them as a valuable ally rather than he does soon after the I'm jumping forward to where it gets towards the end of the book. Paul befriends the Freeman people, wins their trust, proves himself to be a great, powerful potential leader. Paul is exposed to unconscious visions through which he realizes he has significant powers as a result of the Bene Gesserit breeding scheme. He foresees potential futures in which he lives among the planet's native freemen before leading them on a holy jihad across the known universe. Okay, so, but anyway, but you know, long story short, by the end of the first book, right, it's different in the other books, but 2 years pass and Paul's powerful prescience manifests, which confirms the freeman that he is a prophesied Messiah, a legend planted by the Bene Gesserit's Missionaria Protectiva. Paul embraces his father's belief that the freeman could be a powerful fighting force to take back Arrakis, but also sees that if he does not control them, their jihad could consume the entire universe. Also, you know, it's important to note that, you know, Dune does even uses specific Arab terms like jihad, and these are terms in Islam, right? And there's you know, I'm not an Arab person, but I have had some interesting discussions with other Arabs on Twitter and other places about Dune, and well, I'll be nice about it. In Dune, you know, there's a lot of Arabs are kind of frustrated with a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of absence of, you know, of them. You know, there's a lot of writing about them, right? And there's not as much of, you know, they're not their actual perspectives. They don't. I think a lot of Arab people, generally, the sense that I get is they do not feel like their actual perspectives, their worldview, and what they think liberation of the Arab world, right? Like Iraq, right? The people who actually wage jihad, right? Another thing, number one is that jihad is not just a war. That's a Western misconception. Like giving birth is jihad. Like raising children is jihad. Jihad is, you know, is a moral, and obviously it has religious connotations, but it's a moral imperative to do the right thing. And sometimes the right thing means like nurturing children, right? And sometimes the right thing means undoing an evil presence, right? Or a horrible criminal, getting rid of a horrible criminal that has, you know, like for example, if somebody is molesting and harming children, right, and sexually abusing children somewhere, jihad would be to find that person and to stop them through whatever means from doing that, right? That's actually part of the meaning. I mean, that's why I'm not obviously. This is only from my discussions as a native Hawaiian talking to native peoples of West Asia. That's what it means. It doesn't just mean like going on some fanatical conquest, you know, like it's implied that like the jihad. I would argue that, like, you know, when Frank Herbert described jihad as, right, when Frank Herbert described the jihad, and again, you can't say, oh, it's a science fiction. He used the word of, you know, the Middle Eastern Muslim people. Okay, so if you're going to use the word jihad like that, right, then we're gonna take that. Like if somebody said, oh, in my science fictional universe, you know, in my science fictional universe, you know, on planet Hawaii, right, in the star system Pacifica, there is a native people called the Hawaiianans or something, and the Hawaiianans wage, you know, kukaili moku, right? That's a Hawaiian word, right? And the Hawaiians, they're not Hawaiians, they're Hawaiianans in my sci-fi world, and they wage aloha or something, right? And I'll be like, okay, well, so I mean, your claim, well, it has nothing to do with Hawaiians. I'm just taking like almost every single thing about the native Hawaiians, and I'm a white person from America, injecting that into a fantastical science fictional story, and it just happens to resemble you. But then also later on, when I'm giving conferences, when I'm giving press conferences, and I'm on my book tour in New York City, when I'm on NPR, right, when I'm going on Jimmy Kimmel, I talk about it like I understand Hawaiian culture. But when I talk to Hawaiians, I claim, oh, I'm not talking about you, right? But that's like very common, I mean, that's very frustrating. I mean, just it's hard to talk about that. It's hard to understand that if you are a white person. I mean, I understand because you don't like it's like, well, I mean, like why are you so upset? I was just trying to share your native culture, right? But it's kind of like, imagine you're a Hawaiian or an African or a Arab person, right? And you're hearing, I mean, I know it's hard, but it's just try to imagine that. And somebody is just grabbing onto multi-thousand-year-old concepts that are like core to your entire, your existence, that places like America, Britain, France have tried to wipe out, right? Because if you're not American, if you're not British, if you're not French, you're lesser and you're bad and you're wrong. And you have to change through forced genocidal indoctrination, forced cultural assimilation, right? Or death, right? During the colonial era and the neo-colonial era, right? And then imagine that an American then, after centuries of genocide and cultural eradication and murdering millions of people, decides, I'm going to just grab that concept and then stick it in my sci-fi book while claiming to you that I didn't steal it, it's completely made up. But talking to other white people, millions of book and movie consumers, I tell them that I understand Hawaiian people, or I understand Arab people, or I understand African people, or I understand Native Americans. I mean, just imagine how frustrating that is. Right? I mean, and then just try to imagine. And that's why a lot of Arabs are frustrated by Dune. Legitimately so. I mean, how could you not be? Right? I mean, they have to wake up and watch their relatives being blown up. And you have millions of 70, 80-year-old boomer and 50-year-old, 60-year-old boomer white Gen Xers. And sometimes 20, 30, 40-year-old white American, mostly white Americans and Europeans, right? Celebrating this book about what a jihad is and what it's like to be an Arab. I mean, how frustrating, right? And you wake up and you're like, wait, you people are all talking about how you understand climate change and you understand the desert and you understand what jihad and liberation looks like. And I'm over here I'm in Lebanon getting murdered by, we're getting blown up by your bombs and your planes. We're over here in Iraq, still occupied, still being crushed by you. And you're over there dropping mushrooms, getting groovy in a San Francisco. You're at Burning Man, making, Paul Atreides spaceship life-size sculptures with all this money, all these resources, increasing climate change with all of your over consumption, smoking acid, putting on Dune cosplay, like at the recent award shows, putting on Arab cosplay, getting groovy in the desert, wasting electricity, wasting gas, burning the Earth's resources, LARPing as an Arab while we're all dying from your empire that's trying to kill us all for our oil. And you're like, oh, I know what it's like to liberate. I mean, just think of how ridiculous that is. It's just a little bit ridiculous. I mean, I'm being facetious. It's a lot ridiculous. So anyway, but I mean, so that's where a lot of people, and like as a Hawaiian, I feel that all the time. When people say, I'm just trying to help you, that's why I'm flying here and taking your houses. And just a quick update on that. I mean, slight sidebar on that. The United States, this is, just to illustrate the frustration is global. It's not just, it's in the ocean and it's in the desert, right? It's in Caladan. It's in Caladan and it's also in Arrakis. The frustration is worldwide. It's galaxy wide. You know what I'm saying? Was it? Yeah, the Ocean Road Caladan. It's the Ocean Road Caliban because the Tempest takes place on an island in the ocean. Okay, I gotta try to be nice. Okay, so the U.S. is still making us Hawaiians homeless by letting our homes burn in Lahaina and then doubling rents to $8,000. The U.S. occupation of Hawaii, has been really bad. I mean, it's like the U.S. occupation of Palestine has been really bad. The Western occupation of all those countries, Iraq, Syria, it has been really horrible for all those people. It's also been really bad for us in Hawaii. Okay, like this is from this week. 19-year-old Lahaina resident Kauai Brown and her partner survived the Lahaina wildfires in August and got housed in a hotel, only to get kicked out just before Christmas. They lived in their car for the next couple of months on the beach. Brown is due with their first baby any day now. So this is happening right now. The average rent in Maui is $8,000. They doubled it. The collectively, the landlords on Maui, most of them millionaires, billionaires, and corporations, they doubled the average rent after the Lahaina fires, explicitly to hurt, make money from, and get rid of as many native Hawaiians as possible. Lahaina was a cultural capital for us in Maui, right? And now we have unhoused for months and months pregnant Hawaiians living in tents. We already had the highest per capita homeless population, by the way, before Lahaina. That's only gotten worse. And the United States, what is it doing for us? Nothing. Hurting us more. What is Biden doing? Nothing. Hurting us more. Making us more houseless, giving corporations and the landlords as much as they want, bombing us more all over the place, increasing military presence. They're building more bases as we speak. Anyway, just holding on to hope, giving wealthy mega landlords more climate destroying, right? Speaking of Dune, the U.S. just made a giant dune. It's called the Ashes of Lahaina. And all the desertifying, majority unusually dry, in drought or in severe drought. Hawaii is turning into a dune. You know, and not in a good way, not because there's some parts of the world that are like naturally they're going to be desert, but Hawaii is being endunified by the place who loves its Frank Herbert and claims to understand the climate change, and you know, and then it's like, but when you fly here while reading Frank Herbert's, you think you're having like deep, like some kind of deep, you know, you're being clairvoyant and I understand what it's like to have power struggles over oil and like having deserts made of cocaine. Oh, like and I understand what it will take. I'm learning about, you know, climate change, and I understand how we can solve it. Or I don't know, what do you think? What are you learning when you read that? Right, when you're flying on a plane, a Boeing 737, if it doesn't drop its wheel or its landing gear fall off and kill people, or kill you before you get here because all the Boeing planes are crashing. That plane flight you're taking to come to Hawaii is burning as much carbon as 1 year of a Texan's Hummer driving commutes to and from work when you fly on that one plane trip from like New York or Los Angeles or wherever you're flying from to Waikiki, right? And you're reading Dune about climate, about how you're learning about climate change on that plane. And then you get off of that plane and I don't know, what is the point of Western cautionary science fictional tales? I don't think there really is one. I mean, I write them, but I feel like sometimes I'm like, I try to make them, I feel like it needs to be more in your face, because I feel like people, if like they haven't worked, you know,